So, Icarus Uprising. Now, you might be wondering, this game is like so old. Why on earth are you doing a review of it? Well, if you guys saw my MGC video, you saw that one of my pickups was Icarus Uprising for the 3DS. It was actually a game that I really was thinking about getting a while back. However, I never really got to it just because of the fact that it was not easy to find. At least for me. However, at MGC I finally picked it up and I played a lot of it. And time to do the review. Now my history with the series, I really don't have a whole lot. I have played some of the original NES version on like the Switch, but not a whole lot. So I'm fairly new to the series, if you can call it a series, and only like 3 games, NES, Game Boy game, and 3DS game. Anyways, let's get into the presentation. So Icarus Uprising is basically kind of a mixture between Star Fox and Metroid, and I'll get into this a little bit more in depth later on when I talk about gameplay. But the game is really fun, and the graphics are pretty good for 3DS standards. The game came out pretty early in the 3DS's lifespan, so it easily looks pretty good. And everything's laid out pretty well, and every single mission is labeled by chapters, so yeah. But now, what about the story? Now, the story is pretty good. I don't really know much history about the stories of these games. Essentially, the main thing you kind of need to know, and also there's not going to be spoilers, essentially you as Pit are basically the messenger of the gods. Wordplay. By Peloton, and essentially you have to stop Medusa's plans and basically track her down, and while also defeating underworld forces. Okay, there's more story to that, but that's all I'm leaving at it for because spoilers. So on all, the story is pretty good. It definitely does get a lot better later on in the game, so definitely will not disappoint at all. Or if you're just that horrible of a human being, maybe. But anyways, let's get into the real meat. Gameplay. Now, gameplay in this game is kind of divided. There's basically 2 forms of gameplay. Essentially, you have gameplay, which is essentially similar to that of, as I've said before, Star Fox, where you're flying around in the air and you're shooting at underworld forces and all that jazz. Almost sort of like one of those arcade shooter things. I don't really know what they're called, but like those arcade shooters that in like the arcades. It's similar to those in those areas. And then we get into the other section, which are basically the grounded sections, where essentially it's more like a Metroid game or a third-person shooter, to put it lightly. I don't really like it much. I am not a big fan of the ground sections. I don't know, they're just not fun to go through, really, because of the fact that and I'll get into this with the controls and stuff like that, but I just am not into the grounded sections. They just feel a little bit too for me, though it can depend on the person. But let's get into controls. Now, this is where the game sort of falls apart. I mean, it's not really that bad in the grand scheme of things, but this game's controls are really odd. So, essentially, to put it lightly, you use the circle pad to move around. Okay, fair enough. And then you have and this is for the flying sections first. You can fly around using the circle pad. You use the touch screen to actually aim where you're going to shoot, and then you use the L button to shoot. Yeah. It's a little bit weird. But it just gets worse, because here's the real reason I don't like grounded segments. The controls. So essentially it's similar to that of before. However, this time, using the touch screen changes the camera angle, and sometimes it can just be a hassle to change it. Also, the camera is just so up close that it's really hard to act. That sometimes it's just annoying just to figure out where you're supposed to go. Thankfully, they do give you a little green guide arrow, so that way you can kind of get around a little easier. But I don't know. I don't like the fact that you can't change your camera angle. And I also feel like the melee combat, because the grounded sections add melee combat into the equation. And I do not like the melee combat. Sometimes it just causes me to just fall off a ledge or something like that. I can't count how many times I've died just because of stupid stuff like that. I don't know. I've never really liked it. And like, again, I do understand that it is because of the 3DS, but it's like, I don't know. If they made this for like the Wii U or something like that, or the Switch, that'd be so cool. Still, though, the game is playable, just not necessarily something everyone's going to be into. But enough of that. Let's get into the content the game gives. Now, this game was 45 when I paid for it, though I saw another version for $30. I'm gonna assume you had to pay $40 when it first came out, because that's what 3DS games are priced at. And I gotta say, it's not actually that bad, like, in terms of content. You have the main story, but you also have multiplayer modes where it's kind of like more of a third-person shooter. So essentially, it makes it a cross between Kid Icarus and Call of Duty. And you can even play online as well. And there's a lot of other stuff you can do, like listening to songs in the game. I would say that for an early 3DS game, you've got a good amount of content to keep going back to. And also, the story is fairly long as well. And also, when it comes to difficulty, there's not really much to say in terms of difficulty, as you can actually change it yourself, which this is just so cool. Why don't any more games have this option? But yeah, content-wise, very, very good. And finally, one of the big ones, what is the game? How is the game's soundtrack? The soundtrack's just so good. It's so good. It can get upbeat to intense and all that jazz. It's so good. I will say it's nothing like the Smash Brothers series, but it's still great. It's still what I expected. That's really all I have to say. Now, let's get into the final thoughts, I guess you could say it is. I personally think that this game was worth picking up. I was nervous at first because I didn't really want to get the game and then like just play it for a few minutes and just not be a fan of it and then just put it down for life. I'm so glad that this game actually was pretty good and pretty fun. Even for people who aren't that good at these type of games, you could still choose your difficulty and the game's just so much fun to go through. Would I recommend it nowadays? I would recommend it, as it's probably very unlikely we're going to ever get the game on Nintendo Switch. I mean, I would personally love to see it on the Nintendo Switch, or really just on anything, really just because I want to be able to play it more easily. But, yeah. I don't really know. It's like, we're probably not going to get it on Switch, so I'd say if you are interested, if you see it, by all means, give it a go. Maybe you'll like it. Or maybe not. I can't decide that for you. And also, did I forget to mention something? Oh yeah, the game also comes with a stand, which is what makes it a little bit more expensive. And what do I prefer, playing the game with the stand or with my hand? I prefer playing with my hand, actually. I'm sorry. On my scale of 0 to 10, I give this game a very solid 8 out of 10. This was a lot of fun, although I just want to see it get remade. But when will that ever happen? Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you guys agreed with me, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, take care.